and welcome. Kashmir is on the boil yet again. With 2 Indian soldiers mutilated, the country and not just the government is livid. And yet again, the government is issuing strongly worded statements, cutting down on cultural ties with Pakistan and obliquely hinting at military action at the time and place of the Indian Army's choosing. There's an old saying, if all you ever do is what you've ever done, then all you'll ever get is all you've ever got. So on We the People today, we're asking, can India do better? Is there anything we can do other than diplomatic statements, surgical strikes, and banning Pakistani players from IPL? These actions might satisfy public anger in the immediate term, but do they actually advance India's long-term interests? Joining us on the show, Nalin Kohli of the BJP, Manishankar Iyer of the Congress, also former diplomat who has served as India's first Consul General in Karachi from 1978 to 1982. In our studio, former diplomats, KC Singh, also a strategic affairs expert, former ambassador to the UAE and Iran, Vivek Katu, former secretary of the MEA and former ambassador to Afghanistan, General Bikram Singh, former chief of army staff, and Jyoti Malhotra, a senior journalist. Let's start with Nalin, you first. We heard the defense minister, he says the Jawan sacrifices will not go in vain, that the army will respond appropriately, but we've seemed to have heard all of this before. We heard it after the Uri attacks, with which we responded with a strategic strike. And now, yet, we're here where we are. Some would say that these beheadings were in response to the strategic strikes, which were in response to Uri. So where are we going? This tit for tat is not helping anyone.
Well, first of all, just because something has happened in the past in a particular manner does not mean that we stop doing what we have to do. In the United States, immigration has existed for as long as the United States has been, a country whether they invite it or even today, whether there is a plan to build a wall or not. So if that takes place, does that mean do they stop working to stop immigration? The same holds true for us. Are we going to stop working and doing what we need to do vis-a-vis Pakistan? But certainly, some of those options, I wouldn't be aware, you wouldn't be aware, and I'll certainly hope nobody's aware who watches TV. Because those options are best left to those who are going to look at those options, whether it's the armed forces in their right in terms of what they need to do militarily, whether it's with the political leadership, and that to a core level of the political leadership, it won't be a wider level. And when required, it gets extended to others beyond the political party that's in office.
Next but you say we'll continue doing what we're doing. For example, senior BJP leader Subramaniam Swamy has said that these strikes, surgical strikes, have no meaning.
Well, in terms of the surgical strike, there are some who felt or have been interpreting it, and I don't know how they've got to this interpretation, that the surgical strike was a panacea in terms of solving all the problems. That was a message.
No, that was a message we were given from the government.
No, for all problems. I'm very careful of the words I choose. Unfortunately or fortunately, I also am an advocate. So I do know what word I'm saying. Not all problems. It was an objective. It was an objective that was used. It solved its things that it was done, and we compliment the army for doing it in a manner that was very clean. So therefore, that's one. But to expect and say that our relationship post one surgical strike is going to come back and rewind to normal, it's never been normal with Pakistan. We need to live with that fact. And even in the future, we should believe the best case scenario is probably going to be leave each other to each self. But Pakistan, we don't have this kind of a friendly relationship from the beginning. And I don't see it in the foreseeable future also to be one of these hunky-dory. There'll be phases that are good, there'll be phases that are depressed, and there'll be phases that are bad.
Are you giving up on having a better relationship with Pakistan? Is that the BJP's policy officially?
No, not at all. I'm just simply saying it's a recognition of what the reality with Pakistan is. With regard to a policy, the policy is not the party's prerogative. The policy is the government's prerogative. And the government will decide what its prerogative is. For example, I hear sometimes saying that peace versus war. I think we need to understand that eventually peace is something that everybody is going to work for. There's no question about it. Nobody's here a war machine in that sense. But when you talk, why you talk, that is going to be contextual. It can't be picked up in one context and said, oh, in another context. Someday India-Pakistan may talk. They may not talk for a long time.
Okay, so it's when you talk and perhaps how you talk. Ambassador Singh, let me go across to you. This government came to power on a plank where it said it would be tough on terror, it would be tough on Pakistan. We have a senior minister now in this government who in the past had threatened to send bangles to the former PM when there was a beheading under the previous administration. Has Prime Minister Modi got stuck in a jingoistic trap of his own creation? And if so, how does one get out of it?
Well, it is a jingoism trap. Because if you take it public and you say that everything that you do will be discussed in the public, you've taken the tactical to the strategic. Beheadings have been there before. We have a former army chief here. but it was left at the tactical level for the local commander to sort it out, because beheading is a war crime. It's forbidden by the Geneva Conventions and the protocol. And no army of any civilized country would say, we'll openly behead the people.
Absolutely.
But if you come into the government saying, we'll bring 10 heads for one head, you've already fed it into the public narrative. Now the tail starts wagging the dog. So what happens is the social media army, the others who support the BJP government and Prime Minister Modi, they expect instant retribution, a bloody retribution, and you have played into the hands of the Pakistani army. Because which means a veto for any contact with Pakistan. There was Sajjan Jindal, what was he doing up in Pakistan, in Murree? He meets the Prime Minister there, and then you find the army suddenly saying, no, we have the veto. We will mutilate 2 soldiers. It'll feed into the public narrative in India. Indian government will be pushed into then saying, no, exactly what Mr. Kohli is saying. So which means you have now ceded control over diplomacy. And you have just gone through a security apparatus in dealing with Kashmir, in dealing with Pakistan, and it'll be ultimately, you really have no options.
So
if you take it into the public domain.
We're being played by the Pakistani army if we respond
It's
in a
gone into the
certain
hands
way.
of the Pakistani army, completely. My argument is, hurt them certainly, go after. You see, last time the argument they took was, the surgical strike was not against the Pakistani army, it was against the facilities there for terrorists. This time the team has come from the Pakistani army. So will you now punish the Pakistani army? Now, if you do that, then there's a danger of escalation. So either you go on the escalation ladder, or you have now played into the Pakistani army's hands.
As Ambassador Singh points out, beheadings have happened before in the past. The beheading of Paramjit Singh of the Indian Army and Prem Sagar of the Border Security Force by the Pakistani Border Action Team is a barbaric act. Mutilation of bodies on the battlefield is universally recognized as a war crime. It is prohibited under the 1949 Geneva Convention. The Pakistan Army has denied that its soldiers have committed this atrocity. And like we've said, it is not the first time that an Indian soldier has been beheaded at the line of control. Let's take a look at our history. In 1999, during the Kargil conflict, Captain Saurav Kalia was tortured. His badly mutilated body was handed over to India. In February 2000, terrorist Ilyas Kashmiri had led a raid on an Indian army post in Naushera, killing 7 Indian soldiers, including beheading 1 Jawan, Sepoy Bausahib Maruti Talekar of the 17th Maratha Light Infantry. In June 2008, a soldier of the Gorkha Rifles was captured by a Pakistani Border Action Team and was found beheaded. A few days later, in January 2013, Lance Naik Hemraj was killed and his body mutilated by a BAT. In October 2016, the BAT mutilated and killed Sepoy Mandeep Singh, and his body was found in Kupwara. November 22nd, 2016, 3 soldiers were killed, out of which the body of rifleman Prabhu Singh was mutilated in Machil. On May 1st, 2017, in a ceasefire violation, Pakistan's Border Action Team attacked an Indian Joint Patrol Team and mutilated 2 soldiers. This was in Poonch. Let's go across to Prerna Singh. She's the head constable with the Haryana Police. She's the widow of Mandeep Singh of the 17th Sikh Regiment, who was killed and his mutilated body was found in Machil. Prerna ji, thank you so much. आप आए यहाँ पे स्टूडियो में, आपने देखा है क्या हुआ इस हफ्ते में, पूंछ में क्या हुआ है. उसके बाद हमारी सरकार, हमारे पॉलिटिशियंस कह रहे हैं कि there will be a strong answer, पाकिस्तान को आंसर मिलेगी, दम से आंसर मिलेगी. जब आपको इन बातें में अभी विश्वास होती है?
नहीं, मुझे इन बातों में कोई विश्वास नहीं हो रहा. जो इन्होंने पाकिस्तान ने इतनी शर्मनाक हरकत की है हमारे जवानों के साथ, उससे इन्होंने कोई संतुष्टजनक जवाब नहीं दिया हमारी सरकार ने, हमारी इंडियन आर्मी ने पाकिस्तान को. सरकार से हम चाहते हैं कि या तो ये लड़ाई आर पार की जाए. रोज रोज आज एक जवान शहीद हुआ है, कल दूसरा. शहीद होने की बात अलग है, लेकिन उनके शरीर को, उनके बॉडी को शत विशत कर दिया जाता है. उनका शरीर घर तक नहीं जा पाता ठीक तरह से. तो हम चाहते हैं कि सरकार इसे आर पार की लड़ाई कोई ठोस कदम उठाए, जिससे हमारी इंडियन आर्मी और हमारी भारत की जनता संतुष्ट हो.
General Bikram Singh, you've been head of the army at a time when a beheading took place. That was in January 2013, where Lance Naik Hemraj was decapitated. Now, 4 years on, we have another beheading. Where does one go from here? What is the way out? How do you deal with an army as Ambassador Singh has pointed out, an army that refuses to accept the basic code of honor that armies the world over do. How do you deal with an army that will refuse to accept the bodies of its own soldiers and will disown them?
Let me just touch on certain issues which have been brought up earlier by Mr. Kohli and Mr. Casey and the lady. Of course, I sympathize with her for what has happened. Look, surgical strikes are not going to make a dent from the point of view of dissuading Pakistan from closing the tap of exporting terror to India. That will not happen. Such operations are good to placate the national sentiments.
And that's the former army chief saying that the surgical strike is not the answer.
No, it is the answer from the point of view of giving a bloody nose to Pakistan for telling them to behave.
Temporarily.
Yes, it has to be done. No, let me just cover this. Give me 2 minutes, please. You see, if you are looking at putting Pakistani army, which is the center of gravity, who is giving the strength to the terrorists in Pakistan to do what they are doing? The freedom of action, will to fight against India, the Pakistani army. Pakistani army has got to be put under pressure to make sure that they dissuade the terrorists, they become more accountable as an instrument of the state, and they stop using this adversarial relationship with India to their advantage. That's what they've been doing all along. So it's going to be a long drawn affair. What I'm coming to is this response must go in to placate, to assuage the sentiments of this young lady who's here. Rightly so, India must hit out. In addition to that, I think we need to fight this war at the asymmetric level. It's an asymmetric war. It has got to be taken on at the asymmetric level in Pakistan. And I'm not saying we create our own resource and send it across. We create this resource in Pakistan. There are poverty-stricken conditions in Pakistan. You just throw in money over there and you can create this asset. If Pakistan can create that asset in Jammu and Kashmir, what stops India from doing that in Pakistan? And there are a large number of fault lines. There are fissures in Pakistan. You take it Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, you take Balochistan, you take Gilgit-Baltistan, Sindh province. Large number of areas are actually vulnerable today. It is just the political will that is required. But what I wish to bring out is that any number of surgical strikes will only placate the national sentiments. If you want to put an end to this export of terror from Pakistan to India, it has got to be a long-drawn affair, a long haul, a comprehensive strategy where you bleed Pakistan, where you bleed its terrorists on its own soil. And you also expose through a very comprehensive public information and perception management campaign what Pakistan Army is doing. So it's an all-encompassing kind of a strategy and not just military. We are only looking at military, let's look beyond the military as well.
Right, let's put this across to Ambassador Kaju. You think that's practical? Is that possible? You were one of the chief negotiators for India during the Kandahar hijack. How does the fact right now that Pakistan has in its custody an Indian citizen who they've sentenced to death on charges they claim that he was a spy, how does that complicate matters and how does this affect what our response ideally should be?
Look, we'll come to that. But I think the first thing is we've got to, as a people and as a country, clear a confusion in our mind about what Pakistan is. Pakistan and the Pakistani army in particular, and that is the institution that really matters. All this talk of civil society, etc., cuts no ice. It's clear that India is and will be permanently an enemy. They make no bones about it. In India, unfortunately, we are confused. We don't want to consider Pakistan as an enemy. We sometimes think it's a potential friend. It will somehow change. It has not changed in 70 years. So the starting point is to accept the fact that we are dealing with an enemy. Once we clear, then naturally strategies and tactics follow. But as long as this confusion remains in our mind about the nature of the Pakistan state towards India, I'm afraid this terrible cycle will continue. What has happened over the last 20 years? One last sentence. You've talked to them. I know that our senior Mr. Iyer says, let's talk to them in an uninterrupted fashion, uninterruptible talks. My thing is that talks are only a means to an end. Do you think talking with Pakistan, I very humbly submit this, will change their nature? Suddenly, a country which considers you an enemy and a permanent enemy will become a friend and will want to do business with you?
Mr. Iyer. He says the solution is first to decide and declare that Pakistan is the enemy, and talks are not the answer. But at this point of time, in Kashmir and when it comes to Pakistan, the government, its policy is that no talks. Whether this is questionable or not, that is what is consistent about this government. Is that the solution? Because that doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere forward either.
It's a long-term thing. It's not immediate.
If Mr. Karju's view is that the Pakistanis are a deadly enemy who can never be changed, whose view towards India is so hostile that there is no way in which we can influence the mindset of their army, and that the army exists only in order to promote and spread hatred of India, then he's right. But is the assumption right? You know, it so happens that he and I have almost a similar amount of experience of dealing with the Pakistanis. He dealt with them from the desk here. I dealt with them when I was there. And I certainly did not encounter that kind of hostility of a permanent kind among the people of Pakistan. Also, over the last 35 years that I've been back in India, I have visited Pakistan at least 35 times. And in all these visits, I just do not see the Pakistan that is so clear to Mr. Karju that he says clarity requires that we look upon them as an enemy. In my view, clarity requires that we look upon them as people who have views that are opposite to ours, and that we need to somehow reconcile with them. In regard to political opinion as distinct from public opinion, they've had 2 democratic elections in succession recently. In both those elections, the issue of Kashmir was raised by no major party. Only the Jamaat-e-Islami raised the question of Kashmir, and they managed to get only 2 seats in the National Assembly. Insofar as the army of Pakistan is concerned, every time there has been some forward movement, it has been under army governments in Pakistan, not under civil governments. It's a paradox. But the Indus Waters Treaty came about because of Field Marshal Ayub Khan. The Operation Brass Tacks Tension was brought down by a direct conversation between General Zia-ul-Haq and Rajiv Gandhi, resulting in Zia coming to Delhi, having lunch, and totally eliminating the kind of tension that was there. It was under Pervez Musharraf that we had a 4-point formula in the process of being prepared. Point 1 of which was that neither side accepts that Kashmir can be independent. Point 2 was there will be no exchange of territories and no exchange of people, and the aim will be to so soften the LOC as to render it irrelevant. There was complete agreement on these 2 points. On the 2 others, that there should be a joint effort to promote democracy on both sides of the LOC to the same level and development to the same level. There were some drafting problems, but in principle it had been agreed. And the 4th point was that there should be some kind of a mechanism which would oversee the process. There were still some problems over there. This happened when Field Marshal, or what is it called, it's a General Pervez Musharraf was running the place. So therefore the assumption that one makes that these people will never talk to us in a sensible way, that we just can't have anything to do with them. Of course that is true if you start talks and break them. You break the talks, then it's like a game of snakes and ladders. Wherever you've reached, you come right back to the start, and then the snake has swallowed you, and you have to find another ladder.
All right.
So while
let's bring in Jyoti
I
then.
think,
So,
if I may just conclude, just one sentence, if Mr. Karju's assumptions are right, then the strategy he proposes is correct. If his assumptions are wrong, then perhaps you should look to the alternative strategy